I still remember the day John fell ill. Pancreatic cancer, the doctor said, like a death sentence. He fought for 6 months, but with each passing day, I saw him weaken, like a candle burning to its end. We built this log cabin with our own hands, back when we were young, with nothing but love and a few spare coins. Every plank, every nail, was our sweat and laughter. Now, this house is all I have left of him, along with the old armchair he loved to sit in every evening, reading the newspaper and telling me stories of his youth. When John passed away, I felt like half my soul was gone. The wind blowing through the cemetery cut at my skin, as if the heavens knew how empty I felt. I stood there, holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, the kind John would pick every summer when he came in from the garden. Sweat beading on his forehead but still smiling. Here, I saved these for you. Now, it was just me holding the flowers, alone and lost. Mark, my eldest son, stood beside me, but it was as if he wasn't there at all. The suit he wore was newer than the look he gave his mother, perfectly tailored down to the last stitch, the only thing that was perfect. In the way he saw his father off to the earth, not a word of comfort, not a hand to hold, not a touch on the shoulder. He just stood, hands in his pockets, face like stone, his eyes scanning around as if he were attending a financial conference. "Where's Lisa?" I asked softly. Mark glanced at me as if I were bothering him. "She's busy." Busy. I knew what busy meant. Busy drinking with friends at their newly opened restaurant. Lisa never called me mom, only ma'am, and usually with a sigh. To her, I was just a shadow in the kitchen, a moral obligation, a bothersome old woman who made every family meal less enjoyable. I tried to remember, had Lisa ever been kind to me in all these years? I remembered the time I accidentally broke their wedding glass in the display cabinet. Lisa didn't say anything, but that afternoon, I saw a new glass placed back on the shelf, and a bill printed in bold placed right underneath it. Not a word of reproach, just a number, like a cold sentence, instead of affection. My husband's funeral, the man who had worked 3 jobs to put Mark through college, took place without a hug from my son, without a look that asked, "Are you cold, Mom?" He didn't even bother to shed a single tear, even a fake one. That day, I understood the most painful thing. Sometimes, the coldest thing at a funeral doesn't come from the weather. It comes from the very relatives standing next to you. I returned home, sat down in John's armchair. It was worn and torn, the scent of old wood and faint tobacco wafting out whenever I leaned back. I stroked the armrest, as if I could feel his warmth. "John, where did you go?" I whispered, my eyes stinging. His keepsakes, the desk, the shaving kit, the notebook where he scribbled poems, suddenly became sacred. They were proof that we had lived, had loved, had grown old together. But Mark didn't think so. One afternoon, I saw him dragging John's old wooden box out into the yard. "Mark, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. That box, John had made himself, containing the letters we had sent each other for decades, letters scented with time, clumsy words of love, traces of a life that had long passed. It wasn't a treasure to the world, but to me, it was the soul of a family. "Mom, I sold it," Mark replied, without even looking up. "We don't have room for all this clutter. The dead aren't coming back. I'm clearing things out." I stood there, as if someone had just slapped me. "Are you even sane?" He was, "Your father, do you know what's in there? Do you know that to me, every piece of paper is more precious than my own life?" I almost screamed, but my voice trailed off, trembling like a frail old figure with nowhere left to cling to. Mark just shrugged. "Mom, I don't understand why you're clinging to all this old stuff. Dad's gone, you need to be realistic. Keeping this stuff just makes the house more cluttered." Realistic, that word was like a knife to my heart. "What is realistic, son?" I whispered, looking at the armchair. "Is it throwing away a lifetime together like throwing away a pile of old newspapers? This chair, it still holds your father's warmth." But Mark didn't listen. He never listened. In the days that followed, I lived like a shadow. I woke up early, made coffee, sat in John's chair, and looked out the window. I didn't want to eat, didn't want to talk. The neighbor, Susan, brought over a plate of cookies, telling me I had to eat to keep my strength up. "Helen, you have to keep living, for John," she said. I nodded, but in my heart, I just wanted to ask, how do I live when my whole world has shattered? Sometimes, Mark would stop by, but every time he came, I felt uneasy. He looked around the house, his eyes darting around as if he were calculating something. "Mom, this house is too old. It's not safe for you to live here alone," he said, his voice as sweet as sugar. I nodded, thinking he was genuinely worried about me. Little did I know that he was preparing a plan that just thinking about it made my heart want to stop. I started to realize something was wrong when Mark brought home a strange man, calling him an appraiser. They measured the house, flipped through John's books. I asked Mark, "What are you doing with my house?" He smiled, patting my shoulder. "Don't worry, Mom. I just want to see if the house is still in good condition, so I can fix it up for you to live comfortably." I believed him. I had always believed him, because he was my son, my own flesh and blood, but I was wrong. One damp afternoon, Mark called. My heart skipped a beat. He rarely called. Since his father's death, calls from him had become as rare as a luxurious miracle. "Mom, I'm coming over tonight." His voice rang out, so sweet, I almost thought I had the wrong number. "I want to eat the curry you make. I haven't had it since Dad passed away. I miss that flavor so much." I was silent for a few seconds. Curry, the dish John always craved when the weather turned cold each winter. The dish I used to painstakingly cook in our small kitchen, wearing my old apron, while Mark would sneak pieces of the unripe sweet potato. I swallowed hard, my hand gripping the phone, trembling slightly. "Oh, okay, sure. Tonight then, son. By the way, I want to have a family meeting, to discuss things for you, Mom," Mark added. "What kind of meeting, son?" I asked. But he just laughed, a light laugh, like the wind skimming across a lake. "Just let me handle it, Mom. It's for your own good." I was a little curious, but didn't give it much thought. My son remembered the food I cooked. That was enough. I quickly pulled my apron out of the drawer, grabbed my shopping bag, and went to the market like a young girl on her first date with the person she loved. I chose each sweet potato, each carrot, then stood for a long time at the meat counter to find a piece of brisket as tender as Mark used to like. On the way home, the rain started to drizzle again, but my heart was as sunny as early summer. I cooked tirelessly, as if I'd never had a sore back, stirring the curry pot with a smile on my face, because my son was going to eat a home-cooked meal tonight, and he still remembered his mother's flavor. My heart fluttered with a strange joy, small, but enough to warm the entire rainy afternoon. That evening, the table was set as elaborately as if we were celebrating a major holiday. Mark arrived with a strange man, wearing a suit, carrying a leather briefcase, looking like a bank employee. Lisa, his wife, wasn't there as usual. I made coffee, invited them to sit in the living room, but the atmosphere in the house was heavy, as if dark clouds were hanging overhead, nothing like the reunion meal I had imagined. Mark opened his mouth, his voice gentle, but I could sense the insincerity. It wasn't safe for Mom to live alone anymore. Mom was living alone, and her memory was getting worse. He continued, "I've found a wonderful place. Safe, comfortable, you'll have friends your own age. Fun activities." I laughed, a bitter kind of laugh that didn't resemble laughter at all. "Are you kidding me? This is the important thing you wanted to talk to me about." Mark was starting to lose patience. "And I found a nursing home. Very convenient, someone to take care of you 24/7. I froze. A nursing home. I had never thought about leaving this house. This was where John and I had toiled to build, every plank bearing the imprint of our hands. "Mark, I don't want to go anywhere," I said, my voice faltering. "This is my home, your father's home. I want to stay here." Mark looked at me, his eyes as cold as ice. "Mom, I know you love Dad, but you have to think about your health. I can't always be running over here." Then he pushed a stack of papers towards me. "Sign these papers, so I can take care of the insurance and everything. It's just a formality." I looked at the stack of papers, covered in dense writing. My mind was blank. I didn't understand anything about legal matters. John had always taken care of these things, and I had only ever trusted my husband, trusted my son. "Mark, do I really have to sign?" I asked, my hands trembling. He nodded, his voice still sweet. "Trust me, Mom. I'm your son." I picked up the pen, my heart heavy. "If you say so, I trust you," I whispered, then signed each paper. I didn't know that I had just signed away my entire life. Mark smiled, patting my shoulder. "Good, Mom. I'll take care of everything." The man in the suit stood up, shook Mark's hand, and then they stood up. As Mark walked to the door, I called after him, my voice still holding a glimmer of hope like a last ray of sunshine. Son, what about the curry I made? You haven't eaten anything yet. He turned his head, not taking his hand off his phone, his eyes glued to the screen. Maybe later, Mom, I'm very busy. Then the door closed behind him, quickly and neatly, as if the meeting had just been an administrative appointment. I stood there, the house suddenly so silent that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, each tick striking my chest. The smell of curry still lingered in the air, but now it smelled like something lost. I pulled out my chair and sat down alone. In front of me was a table set for two, but only one person remained, and I understood that dinner wasn't a family meal. It was a trap. A few days later, Mark came back. This time, he wasn't smiling. Mom, you have to go today, he said, his voice curt. I've got everything ready. The car's waiting outside. I panicked. Go where, Mark? Tell me clearly. But he just shook his head. Mom, just get in the car. I'm taking you to a new place. I didn't have time to think. I grabbed John's coat, a few changes of clothes, and the small wooden box containing his keepsakes, letters, our wedding ring, a photo of us when we were young. I walked out the door, looking back at the house one last time. My heart clenched, as if I knew I wouldn't be back. Mark, will I be able to come home? I asked, my voice lost. He didn't answer, just pushed me into the car. The car was an old van. The driver didn't say anything except to tell me to sit still. The car drove on and on, through unfamiliar roads, further and further away from my town. I started to worry, but told myself Mark wouldn't do anything to hurt his own mother. Then, the car stopped. Not in front of a nursing home, not a hospital, but under a bridge, near a truck stop. The driver opened the door. You get out here. I was only told to bring you here. I stood there, stunned, clutching my bag. Where is this? I shouted, but the car had already sped away, leaving me in the thick darkness. I looked around. There was only the roar of trucks cutting through the air, and the acrid smell of motor oil suffocating me. The space under the bridge was dark, low, and stifling like a living tomb. The wind whistled through the gaps between the gray concrete pillars, carrying all sorts of foul odors, old oil, thick exhaust fumes, stagnant sewage, and the pungent, rotting smell of discarded waste, spoiled food, beer cans, slimy plastic, bags stained with fish blood from some market stall. The smell hit me in the face, reaching my brain, making me nauseous to the point of doubling over. But I couldn't throw up. I had nothing left to vomit except the truth. I clutched my bag to my chest, my hands trembling like a child lost in a wasteland. My legs were frozen, routed to the slimy ground, but my heart wanted to shrink, to find a place to disappear. Every breath caught in my throat, painful as swallowing stones. In the thick darkness, in this filthy world, I was left with nothing but a disgusting insignificance. In the distance was the screech of container truck brakes, the headlights sweeping across patches of black moss blurred like bruises on the skin of the city. I stood frozen like a soulless corpse in a graveyard. Under my feet were jagged rocks, shards of broken glass, glinting like fangs, and a few torn garbage bags, swarming with flies. Mark, you said I was going to a nursing home, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Why is this happening? Son, what did I do wrong to you that you abandoned me here? I huddled in John's coat, sitting down in a corner under the bridge, clutching the wooden box like a treasure. I didn't know how long I sat there, only that I was chilled to the bone and my heart was breaking. I had given birth to Mark, raised him, loved him more than myself. Yet he threw me out on the street, as if I were an expired item to be discarded. In the days that followed, I lived like a faint shadow under the bridge, nameless, voiceless, without anyone to ask after me. I didn't know what to do except try to survive. Every morning, I picked up scraps of bread someone had thrown by the trash can, wiping off the dust with the hem of my coat. I drank water from a rusty public tap, having to catch each drop as if catching the fragments of my shattered self-respect. At night, I lay on the cold ground, using the bag containing a few old clothes as a pillow. I wrapped John's coat tightly around me, as if embracing a part of my life that had gone away. The wind whistled through the cracks in the stone, hitting my face like invisible slaps. But I didn't cry anymore. I had no more tears. John, do you see our son? ... He's so terrible, my love, I whispered. But only the wind answered. I closed my eyes, and in my flickering dreams, I saw myself 30 years ago, holding Mark when he had a high fever and convulsions, running through the night to the clinic because we didn't have a car, my hand trembling as I held a hastily mixed bottle of sugar water. I saw myself standing in our old kitchen, my hair pulled back, stirring the curry pot as the weather turned cold. Mark running around the table, asking for more, John sitting and reading the newspaper, smiling. I used to think if I just loved enough, I would never be abandoned. One day, I met Carla, an old friend from school. I happened to see her on a street corner, as I was begging for spare change from passersby. I was ashamed, wanted to disappear into a corner, and bowed my head, but Carla recognized me. "Helen, oh my God, how did you end up like this?" she asked, her eyes reddening. I told Carla everything about Mark, about the house, about the underpass. She listened, her face pulling. Then she took me back to her house, gave me a hot meal, and started digging through paperwork. After a few days, Carla sat down, looking at me with a mixture of anger and pity. "Helen, I'm sorry to be blunt. Your son isn't just unfilial. He sees you as a living asset, tricked you into signing papers to take over the house and mortgage it to the bank. You've been scammed." I sat there, as if someone had slapped me. The house, my sweat and love with John, now in Mark's hands, and he had mortgaged it to pay off debts. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just felt a deep hole in my heart, where the love for my son used to be. "Carla, what do I do now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She took my hand. "Helen, you're not alone. I'll help you get back what's yours. But you have to be strong." I nodded, even though I didn't know if I had any strength left. But in my mind, a small fire began to burn. I had lost John, lost my home, lost my faith, but I wouldn't let Mark take away my dignity. Never. One afternoon, when the cold seeped into my bones, I sat huddled, clutching the wooden box containing John's keepsakes. Hunger gnawed at me, not as fiercely as a burning fire, but simmering like a dull knife slowly twisting in my stomach. But I had nothing to eat except a stale cookie I'd found in the trash. I closed my eyes, trying to remember the smell of John's baking when he was alive, but only the smell of motor oil and dirty earth filled my nostrils. Then I heard footsteps. An old man, with snow-white hair, wearing a tattered coat, approached. He was pushing a cart full of plastic bags and old cans. I thought he would pass by, like everyone else, but he stopped. "Hey, are you very cold?" he asked, his voice raspy but warm. "Come here, I have some hot soup left. It's not good, but it'll warm your belly." I looked up, stunned. You'd share with me. "You don't have anything either, I said, my voice trembling. The old man smiled, a wrinkled but honest smile. "Here, if you don't share, people die a long time ago," he said. Then ladled a bowl of soup from the old pot in his cart and handed it to me. The soup had nothing but a few tiny pieces of potato and a little salt, but when I drank it, I felt like my whole body was warming up. "I'm James," he introduced himself, sitting down beside me. Tell me, how did you end up like this?" I looked at James, the first stranger to be kind to me since I was abandoned. I choked up, tears welling up. "I don't know anymore. My son, he said he was taking me to a nursing home. But then he left me here. I cherished him like my own flesh and blood. And yet now, I told him everything, from John's death, to how Mark tricked me into signing the papers, and then threw me under the bridge. Saying it all made me feel a little lighter, but also so painful that I just wanted to disappear from this world." James listened, without interrupting. When I was finished, he sighed. "I used to be a Marine, had a house, a family, but then my wife left me. My children didn't want anything to do with an old alcoholic like me. Now it's just me and this cart." He patted the cart, smiling sadly. "But you, at least you're still alive, and as long as you're alive, there's still a chance." I looked at James, the man who had nothing but a little soup and an old blanket, but was willing to share it with me. "Thank you," I whispered, hugging the now cold bowl of soup. "You're good to me, even though you don't know who I am." James shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Here, we're all the same. Forgotten, abandoned." In the days that followed, James became my only friend. He taught me how to live under the bridge, where to find clean water, where to pick up food that was still usable, how to avoid the drunks who liked to cause trouble. Every night, he brought a crumb of bread or an old can of beans, sharing half with me, He even gave me an old blanket, musty but warm enough. "You keep this," he said. "It's going to be very cold this winter." I started telling James about John, about how he used to sing old Johnny Cash songs, about the time we built the log cabin and slept outside because we hadn't finished the roof. James listened, laughing loudly. "Sounds like me when I was young. I also dreamed of having a house. But life never gave me the chance." I felt sad for him, but also comforted, because at least I wasn't alone. One night, as we sat around a small fire, James told me about his time in the Marines, about the storms at sea, and the letters he wrote to his wife but never sent. "You know, Helen," he said, his eyes looking into the fire, "I don't regret loving them, even though they left me, but I regret letting them make me forget who I was." James's words were like an awakening. I had let Mark take away too much, my home, my faith, my self-respect, but I was still here, still breathing, still had memories of John. "James, do you think I can get back what I've lost?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked at me, his eyes lighting up. "You can, if you want to, but not to get revenge, but to live a new life for yourself." I nodded, clutching the wooden box tightly. Inside, I still kept John's letter, the one I hadn't dared to open for fear of crying. But that night, I thought I was ready. I needed a reason to continue, and maybe John had left that reason for me every day under the bridge. I lived on a little hot soup and James's kindness, but in my heart, I still felt like a shadow, not knowing where to go or what to do. Every night, I clutched the small wooden box, the only thing I had taken with me when Mark threw me out. Inside was John's wedding ring, a photo of us when we were young, and a letter he had written that I hadn't dared to open. I was afraid that reading it would make me cry, afraid that it would remind me that I had lost everything. One night, as James was sleeping by the fire, I sat huddled under the dim moonlight. The cold wind cut at my skin, but I didn't feel anything anymore. I looked at the wooden box, my hand trembling. "John, what did you leave me?" I whispered, as if he was still somewhere, listening to me. I opened the box and took out the letter. The envelope was yellowed, John's handwriting still clear, as strong as he was. I took a deep breath, tore open the letter, and began to read. "My dearest Helen," the letter began, "by the time you read these words, I will probably be gone. I know you are strong, but I also know you will be in pain. I fear that one day the children will hurt you, but I fear even more that they will not understand your worth. Therefore, I have left something for you alone, a real estate investment account in your name, worth over $2 million. The children are grown. They have their own lives. You live freely, as you always dreamed. I love you, forever, John." I placed the letter on my lap, my hand still gripping the edge of the paper as if afraid it would dissolve into the air. $2 million. I read the number over and over again. Not because I was greedy for money, but because it was like a hand placed on my shoulder, soothing my pain, just when I thought I was falling endlessly. I sat there, tears streaming down my face. "Oh, John, you knew everything, didn't you?" I choked out, my voice lost. "You knew the children would do this to me. You told me to live freely, but now I just want you here, for just 1 minute." I hugged the letter to my chest, as if I could feel John's warmth. $2 million, an amount I had never dared to dream of. But more than the money, John's words were what saved me. He believed in me, loved me, even when I was betrayed by my own son. That letter was like an awakening. I couldn't just lie here, under the bridge, and let Mark win. I had to stand up, not to get revenge, but to live for myself, as John wanted. But I didn't know where to start. I was just an old woman, not understanding anything about money or law. Then I remembered Carla, the old friend who had found me on the street corner, who had pulled me out of the darkness. I decided to find Carla. The next morning, I said goodbye to James, promising to come back. "Where are you going, Helen?" he asked, his eyes worried. "I have to find a friend," I replied. "Thank you, James. If it weren't for you, I would have given up." He smiled, patting my shoulder. "Go on, old woman. But remember to come back. I'm saving half a loaf of bread for you." I walked 4 miles, my feet aching, to Carla's house in the suburbs. When she opened the door, seeing me standing there, my coat torn and my hair disheveled, she hugged me tightly. "Helen, are you okay? Oh my God, come in." Carla pulled me into the kitchen, made coffee, and sat listening to me tell her about John's letter. I showed it to her, my hand still trembling. Carla, I don't know what to do. I just know this is my last chance. Carla read the letter, her eyes lighting up. Helen, this isn't just about money. This is John's legacy. For you, I'll help you. I used to be a lawyer. I know how to handle these things. She started researching, making phone calls, digging through the records about my house. I sat there, both hopeful and afraid, as if standing before a door and not knowing where it led. A few days later, Carla called me into the living room, her face serious. Helen, I don't want to hurt you more, but I have to tell you, Mark didn't just take your house. He also secretly applied for a psychiatric diagnosis for you, claiming you were losing your mind because you were grieving for your husband. He used a clip of you crying alone in your room as evidence. He wants to declare you legally incompetent, to steal everything. I was stunned, as if someone had slapped me. The clip he filmed me when I was crying for his father. I whispered, my voice breaking. Oh my God, Mark, you're my son. How could you do this to your mother? I remembered the nights I sat in John's chair, crying alone, thinking no one saw. It turned out Mark had been there, not to comfort me, but to film me, to turn my pain into a weapon. My heart was torn apart, but this time, I didn't cry. I just felt a fire burning in my heart, not anger, but determination. Carla, I want to get back what's mine, I said, my voice more certain than ever, not because I want the money, but because John believed in me, and I can't let him down. Carla nodded, taking my hand. Okay, Helen, we'll start with this account. I'll find a way to trace the money and check the status of the house, but you have to be ready. Mark won't let you win easily. I nodded, even though I didn't know if I was strong enough, but I knew one thing. John's letter wasn't just about money. It was a reminder that I still had value, still deserved to live. And Mark, no matter what he had done, couldn't take that away. I went back to the underpass, told James about the letter. He sat listening, his eyes lighting up. You see, Helen, I told you, you were stronger than you thought. Now go, reclaim your life. I smiled, for the first time in months. Thank you, James. You're the only true friend I have. In the days that followed, Carla was like a whirlwind. She made calls everywhere, met with the bank, dug through the records about my house. I didn't understand all the legal stuff, but I trusted Carla. She used to be a lawyer, sharp as a knife, and most of all, she was the only friend willing to stand by me. I just sat there, listening to her explain about mortgages, accounts, and how Mark had borrowed money using my house as collateral to spend. He thought you would never find out, Carla said, her voice bitter. But he was wrong. Carla discovered that the house, after being mortgaged by Mark, had fallen into default. The bank was about to foreclose because Mark couldn't pay. This is your chance, Helen, Carla said, her eyes lighting up. With John's money, you can buy back the house before the bank auctions it off. Mark will never see it coming. I was stunned by back the house that John and I had toiled to build, where we carved our names on the plank, where I raised Mark. The thought both thrilled me and scared me. Carla, do I have the strength? I asked, my voice trembling. She took my hand. You don't just have the strength, Helen, you have the right. That house is yours, and I'll make sure it comes back to you. We did everything quietly. Carla contacted the bank, used John's account to place a bid. I didn't say anything to anyone, not even James. I was afraid that if I spoke it out loud, the hope would vanish, like so many times before. Every day, I walked from the underpass to Carla's house, listening to her update me on the progress. I still wore John's coat, clutched the wooden box, but in my heart, I began to feel like I wasn't a useless old woman anymore. One morning, Carla called me over. She held a stack of papers, smiling. Helen, it's done. The house is yours. The bank accepted, and Mark doesn't know anything. He's still living there, thinking he's the owner. She handed me the certificate of ownership, my name, Helen Marie Thompson, printed clearly on it. I took the paper, my hand trembling. I never thought I'd have my name on this house again, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Thank you, Carla. Now I know what I have to do. I looked out the window, imagining the log cabin with the white fence, where John used to sit and tell stories, where I used to think I would live until the end of my days. It was mine again, not because I was lucky, but because John had believed in me, and Carla had fought for me. But I didn't want to just stop at getting the house back. I wanted Mark to know that I hadn't given up, that I was stronger than he thought. Carla, Can you send Mark a notice? I asked. I want him to know the house isn't his anymore. Carla nodded, smiling. I'll do it right away. But, do you want to say anything to him? I thought for a moment. I didn't want to scream at Mark, didn't want to curse him. I just wanted him to see that I, his mother, had stood up. Just tell him that the house is back in my hands, I replied, and he has 1 week to move out. Carla prepared the documents, sent them to Mark through a lawyer. I didn't know how he would react, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I used to think Mark was my whole world, but now I knew. My world was myself and people like John, Carla, James, the ones who truly cared. I went back to the underpass, told James. He sat listening, his eyes lighting up. You did it, Helen. He laughed, clapping his hands. I told you you were stronger than you thought. So what now? What are you going to do with that house? I looked at James, the man who had shared a crumb of bread when I had nothing left. I don't know yet, James, I replied. But I want it to be a home again, not just for me, but for people like us, the forgotten ones. From then on, I started planning, with Carla by my side and John's letter in my heart. I didn't know what the road ahead would be like, but I knew one thing. I had taken back the house, and more importantly, I had taken back myself. I'll stop here, because my story is long. What happened next, the confrontation with Mark, the days I rebuilt my life, I'll tell you later. But for now, I just want to say that winter, I learned that strength isn't about money or revenge. It's about daring to stand up, even when life has tried to knock you down. Carla prepared everything. She sent an official notice to Mark through a lawyer, demanding that he move out within a week. But I wanted to tell him myself. Not because I wanted to see him in pain, but because I needed to close this chapter, for my own peace of mind. I borrowed Carla's phone, sat down at the kitchen table, and took a deep breath. My hand trembled as I dialed Mark's number. I didn't know what he would say, but I knew I had to do this. The phone rang 3 times before Mark answered. Mom. His voice was curt, as if I were a stranger bothering him. I swallowed hard, keeping my voice calm. Hello, son, I said, slowly. You're going to have to move out of the house, because it's back in my hands now. You have 1 week. I don't want to make it difficult for you. Silence. I heard Mark's breathing through the phone. Then he shouted, Mom, what are you talking about? This house is mine. Where did you get the money to take it back? Are you crazy? His voice was full of anger, but I could also hear the panic. He didn't expect it. Never expected that the old woman he abandoned under the bridge could do this. I didn't respond to his anger. I just said, my voice still even, you heard me, 1 week. I won't say it again. Then I hung up, my hand still trembling. I sat there, looking at the cold cup of coffee on the table. I didn't feel happy, didn't feel victorious. I just felt a deep hole in my heart, where the love for Mark used to be, but I knew I had done the right thing. A few days later, Carla walked in, her face pale, holding a printed sheet of paper. Helen, you need to read this, she said, her voice serious. I took the paper. It was an email that a bank employee, a friend of Carla's, had accidentally seen and forwarded to her. The email was from Mark, sent to some of his friends. I read it, and each word was like a knife. Thought the old hag would die soon, but she's as tenacious as a leech. Now she wants the house back. She's completely insane, Mark wrote, as if I were an enemy, not his mother. I sat down, clutching my chest, as tenacious as a leech. Huh, son, I whispered, my eyes stinging. You thought I would die so you could be at peace. No, I will live, and live well. I didn't cry. I had cried too much for Mark, for the nights under the bridge, for the times he filmed me to call me insane. But this time, I just sat there, feeling a strange calmness. I wasn't angry at Mark anymore. I just felt sad, sad for the child I had given birth to, but now had to bury him in my heart. I looked at Carla, my voice hoarse. I gave birth to a child, I said, slowly, as if reading a poem. But I never thought I would have to bury that child in my heart while I was still alive. Carla took my hand, saying nothing. She understood. She always understood. I went back to the underpass, told James. He sat on the old plastic chair, listening to me, his eyes lighting up. You did it, Helen. He laughed, clapping his hands. You showed that kid you're not someone to mess with. So what now? What are you going to do next? I looked at James, the man who had shared a crumb of bread when I had nothing left. I don't know yet, James, I replied. But I want that house to be not just for me, I want it to be a place for people like us, the forgotten, the abandoned. James nodded, smiling. You have a big heart, Helen. I know you'll do it. In the days that followed, I began to think about the future. Carla helped me plan, from renovating the house to making sure Mark couldn't cause trouble. I didn't want to meet him, didn't want to hear him apologize or make excuses. I just wanted to close this chapter, so I could move on, not for Mark, but for myself, for John, and for people like James. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Mark wouldn't give up easily, and I was still just an old woman, with nothing but determination and a few friends. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had gone from the underpass to here, had taken back the house, had looked my son in the eye without giving up. The log cabin was back in my hands, but it wasn't truly a home yet. Not because it lacked furniture or because of the cracks in the walls, but because I knew a house only has meaning when the people I love are there. And the first person I thought of was James, the homeless old man who had shared a bowl of hot soup when I was huddled under the bridge. I decided to go back to the underpass to find him. Carla took me, even though she was worried I would be sad to see that place again. Helen, are you sure? She asked, taking my hand. I nodded. Carla, James saved me when I had nothing left. I have to find him, to let him know how important he is to me. We drove to the underpass, where the smell of motor oil and the sound of trucks were still the same. I got out, John's coat still on my shoulders, my heart pounding. I hoped James was still there, still pushing the cart full of old cans, still smiling that wrinkled smile. But when I arrived, the scene before me made my heart clench. James was surrounded by 2 police officers. He stood there, hunched over, clutching the cart as if it were a treasure. One of the police officers shouted, his voice harsh, "Old man, move your stuff. Sleeping under the bridge is against the law. You know that. Want to be thrown in jail?" James didn't answer, just bowed his head, as if he was used to being scolded. I felt the blood rush to my head. James, the man who had given me half a crumb of bread when he had nothing, was now being treated like trash, while Mark, the son I gave birth to, was living in the house he had stolen from me, without a shred of remorse. I didn't think much, just walked straight over. "Excuse me," I said, my voice firm. "He's not doing anything wrong. I'll vouch for him. He's my friend." The police officer looked at me, from my worn coat to my old face, then frowned. "Who are you? What's your connection to this old man?" I stood up straight, looking him in the eye. "I'm Helen Thompson, and he's my family. I'm taking him home. You leave him alone." Carla stepped forward, presented her identification and some legal explanations. The police officer muttered something, then left. James looked up, his eyes surprised. "Mrs. Helen," he asked, his voice trembling, "why did you come back?" I'm just a homeless old man." I took James's hand, his hand cold and rough. "James, you're not just a homeless old man," I said, my eyes stinging. "From now on, you're staying at my house. I'm choosing you as my family. You saved me when I had nothing left. Now I want you to live the rest of your life in peace." James looked at me, stunned. "Mrs. Helen, I just gave you a little bread. Why are you so good to me?" He tried to smile, but I saw his eyes redden. I hugged him, not caring that his clothes were dirty or the cart smelled musty. "You gave me more than bread, James," I whispered. "You gave me hope." I took James to the log cabin. As we walked through the gate, I saw him hesitate, as if afraid of dirtying the floor. "Come on in, James," I said, pulling him along. "This is my house, and now it's your house too." I led him into the kitchen, made a hot cup of coffee, and we sat there, telling stories like 2 old friends. I told him about the house, about how Carla helped me get it back, about the phone call to Mark. James listened, laughing loudly. "You're a real fighter, Helen. I bet that kid is going crazy." I laughed. For the first time in months, a real laugh. But in my heart, I still felt a void. Mark was gone, without an apology, only leaving behind a bitter email calling me as tenacious as a leech. But James, who had nothing, was here, making me feel like I wasn't alone. In the days that followed, James and I began to renovate the house. I used some of the money from John's account to buy new paint, fix the leaky roof, and replant the white chrysanthemums that John used to love. James helped me, even though he kept saying he was clumsy. "Mrs. Helen, I'm only used to pushing a cart, not holding a hoe," he joked, but he worked hard, as if the house was also his. One evening, as we sat on the porch, looking at the moonlight, I told James about my idea. "James, I want this house to be more than just our home," I said. "I want it to be a place for people like us, the abandoned, the forgotten, a place where they can rest, eat a hot meal, and feel cared for." James looked at me, his eyes lighting up. "You have a big heart, Helen. If you can do it, I'll be the first one to stand behind you." I smiled, taking his hand. "Thank you, James. You're the family I chose, and I'll never forget that." I never thought I would start over in the backyard, but then one morning in early April, when the sunlight streamed through the kitchen window and shone on John's old armchair, I suddenly felt my heart ache, not with pain, but with peace. They say that after losing everything, if you're still lucid enough to pour a glass of water, cook a meal, then you still have a chance to start over. So I stepped out into the yard, where the weeds were ankle high, and the rose bushes that John used to plant were withered, dry as paper. I picked up the old gardening shears, the kind where the handle was worn and rough with age, and began to cut each clump of grass. No one told me to do it. I didn't expect anyone to praise me. I just knew, if I was still breathing, then I couldn't let this yard reflect the decay in my heart any longer. James had been living with me since the day I bailed him out of being dragged away like a piece of trash. He didn't say much, just helped me rebuild the wooden fence, sweep the yard, and sometimes cook a simple pot of vegetable soup. We didn't need many words. Someone who had been abandoned would understand what empathetic silence meant. I called that garden the porch of kindness. The name came to me when I was sitting on the steps, watching James feed the stray dog, and the neighborhood kids ran by calling out, "Mrs. Helen, will you tell us a story?" I set up a few wooden chairs around the yard, added the old table that John had repaired years ago. I brought out some children's books from the church, some boxes of crayons, some toys I picked up from the thrift store. Before long, the kids in the neighborhood started flocking over, not to do anything big, just to sit and play, listen to stories, draw some scribbled pictures. One afternoon, an old woman named Margaret came by. She used to be an elementary school teacher. Now she lived alone after her husband passed away. Margaret sat down beside me, her hand still trembling as she held her cup of tea. "Aren't you going to ask me where I came from?" she asked, half wary, half resentful. I smiled, pouring more tea for her. "Here, I don't ask why," I replied. "If you just need a place to rest, I have a place for you." That answer seemed to release a knot in her chest. She cried. I didn't ask anything more. Some tears don't need a reason, just a place to flow. I started planting flowers again, not expensive flowers, a few chrysanthemums, some lavender bushes, a row of tulips that I had always liked but never had the chance to plant. I sowed each seed as if sowing back the faith I had lost for too long. James helped me put up a small wooden sign in front of the gate. "Everyone is welcome." Each letter was written by hand, a little crooked, but I thought that imperfection made it more sincere. One day, a suntanned boy knocked on the door. "Ma'am, I'm hungry," he said softly, not daring to look me in the eye. I led him into the kitchen, gave him half a loaf of bread and a glass of milk. He ate so quickly that I had to say, "Slow down, no one's going to take it from you." After he finished eating, he just said, "Thank you, ma'am. I've never had bread and butter that tasted so good." Then he ran off. I didn't know his name, where he came from. I didn't ask. I just hoped he would come back the next day, and this time, I would ask him if he liked to read stories. My meals were no longer just for me. Sometimes there were 3 portions, 5 portions, 10 portions, depending on who came, who stayed. I didn't ask why. I just cooked, like I used to cook for my son, setting the table, placing the spoons neatly, waiting for the sound of "Mom, I'm hungry." But now it was different. No one called me Mom anymore, but I heard so much more. "Ma'am, I'm so happy. Today, Mrs. Helen, I finished drawing. Look, ma'am, I can't read. Will you read to me?" And I felt my heart fill up in a different way. No longer empty, no longer hollow. Every day, I knew I was still needed. I don't know how much longer I will live, but I know one thing for sure. If one day I can no longer open the door, I want people to remember me not as an old woman abandoned by her son, but as a woman who turned her pain into a garden of flowers. One child once told me, "Mrs. Helen, you tell stories better than the teacher." I just smiled, stroking his head. "I don't plant flowers to show off," I said, "but to remind myself that, even if you've been trampled on, life can still bloom again. The porch of kindness was now my heart. Every day, I saw new faces, homeless people, old people, children, coming to eat a hot meal, read a book, or just sit under the shelter to feel like they still existed. James helped me distribute soup, tell stories to the children, and Carla brought books and food from charities. The garden was full of chrysanthemums and sunflowers, just as John had wanted. I thought I had found peace, that the wounds from Mark and the past had healed. But then, a letter arrived, and it reminded me that some scars never disappear. That morning, I was watering the flowers when a mail carrier stopped his car in front of the gate. "Mrs. Helen Thompson?" he asked, handing me a white envelope. I nodded, thinking it was paperwork from Carla about funding for the porch. But when I opened it, the slanted handwriting made my heart clench. It was Lisa's handwriting, the one who had stood by and watched her husband Mark trick me into signing the papers to steal the house. I sat down on the porch, my hand trembling, the letter on my lap. James passed by, seeing my pale face. "Mrs. Helen, are you okay?" "What's the letter?" he asked, worried. I shook my head. "I don't know yet, James. But I need to read it alone." He nodded, patted my shoulder, then went back to helping the children arrange the chairs. I took a deep breath, opened the letter. "Dear Mom," Lisa wrote, "I know you don't want to hear from me. I was wrong, terribly wrong. I let Mark do terrible things to you, and I didn't stop him. I was afraid of losing him, afraid of losing my family. But now I see, I lost you, the person I should have protected. I'm sorry, Mom. I beg you to give my husband and me another chance. I want to make things right." I read it over and over, each word like a knife. "Sorry," I whispered, my voice bitter. "It's easy to say that now. But when you stood there watching your husband trick me into signing the papers, did you think of me?" I remembered the day Mark brought the stack of papers, Lisa standing behind him, her eyes downcast, not saying a word. I had called her my daughter, had cooked for her, had hugged her when she gave birth to my grandchildren. Yet she let me be thrown under the bridge, without a single word. I stood up, went into the house, and took John's picture off the shelf. It was a photo of us when we were young, standing in front of the newly built log cabin, smiling brightly. I took Lisa's letter, placed it next to John's photo, and sat down in his old armchair. "My love," I whispered, looking at John's smile, "I'm not taking revenge. I'm just reclaiming what rightfully belongs to me. You would understand me, wouldn't you?" I didn't answer the letter. Not because I was angry at Lisa, or because I wanted her to suffer. I just didn't have the strength to open my heart to the people who had hurt me. I had forgiven, in my own way, by not letting resentment imprison me. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, didn't mean inviting them back into my life. Lisa and Mark had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine, a path full of chrysanthemums and children's laughter. I went back to the garden, continuing to water the flowers, as if the letter had never arrived. James saw me, asked softly, "Are you okay, Helen?" I smiled, patting his shoulder. "I'm fine, James. Just a letter from the past, but I live for the present." He nodded, not asking anything more, as he always understood me. In the days that followed, the porch of kindness became even more crowded. Some people brought food, some repaired the shelter, some taught the children to draw. One afternoon, an old woman came by, her hair snow-white, telling me that her son had kicked her out of the house. I hugged her, gave her a bowl of soup. "Here, your family," I said. She took my hand, crying. I understood, because I used to be her, used to think I had nothing left. Carla started talking about expanding the porch. "Helen, we can apply for funding, build more sleeping spaces, hire people to help," she said, her eyes lighting up. I nodded, but in my heart, I knew I wanted more than that. I wanted to leave a legacy, not just the house, but a place where no one was forgotten. Lisa's letter reminded me that blood family could betray you, but the family you choose, like James, like the people in the garden, would stay. I had never thrown a party in my life without preparing a guest list, a clean tablecloth, matching cups and saucers. But that day, I didn't need any of that. Just a sunny afternoon, a few old wooden chairs, and a large teapot. I placed the teapot right on the table John had built in 1991. The tabletop still had a faint burn mark where he had accidentally set down a hot soup pot. The seating was a mix of old plastic chairs and wooden chairs, with broken legs propped up with bricks by James. The children sat on the grass, holding cookies I made with discounted flour and unsalted butter from the corner grocery store. James wore the shirt I had just washed yesterday, and I had cut his hair with kitchen scissors. Sitting next to him was Margaret, the woman who used to be afraid to leave the house after her husband passed away, now reading a children's book to a little boy sitting on her lap. There was no music, no balloons, just the sound of birds singing and the gentle clinking of spoons against teacups. I stood up, holding my hot cup of tea, my voice a little shaky but clear enough. Thank you all for coming. There's nothing fancy today, just us, the ones who used to be forgotten, now sitting here as a family. Some people clapped, some just smiled quietly. I looked around, seeing the imperfect faces, people missing teeth, people wearing torn shoes, children with hair as tangled as birds' nests, but their eyes, their eyes were the same, at peace. James looked at me, his eyes crinkling up with laughter. Mrs. Helen, I never thought I'd be sitting in such a beautiful garden. You're a real miracle. I just laughed and poured him more tea. My hands weren't as quick as they used to be, but they weren't trembling anymore. That afternoon, I gave Carla, my old lawyer friend, a thick envelope. Inside was my new will, the entire house, the savings account, and even the investment that John had left behind. I left it all to a small fund I created. I named it, For Those Forgotten by Their Own Blood. Carla cried. She didn't say anything, just took my hand. I didn't create the fund because I wanted to be remembered. I just didn't want anyone else to have to huddle under a bridge, cold and hungry, like I had been. When everyone had left, the sun still lingered lightly on the grass. James was playing chess with a little boy named Ali. He used to cry all night the first time he came here because his parents were in jail. I sat on the stone bench next to the newly blooming lavender bushes, listening to the wind rustling through the leaves, as if someone was gently patting my shoulder. I closed my eyes, not because I was sad, but because my heart felt so much lighter. John used to say, Helen, you just live kindly. Let God take care of the bad ones. I didn't think about who was right or wrong anymore. Mark, Lisa, maybe they would never understand. But it didn't matter anymore. I had been pushed out of my own home. But I didn't rebuild the walls. I planted flowers. And let those flowers remind them that Mom didn't take revenge. Mom just lived kindly until the end. What do you think of today's story? Don't hesitate. Leave a few lines below the article. I always read every word, every letter with all my appreciation. Oh, and by the way, what's the weather like where you are today? Is it cold, or has spring arrived with a little soft sunshine? Have you been out riding your bike, taking a walk, or simply sitting quietly, listening to the wind breathe? Tell me about it right below this story. I'm here, waiting for kindred spirits.